The copper-colored rain fell in sheets across the trading post of Cathera Station, each droplet carrying the metallic taste of the nearby mining operations. Viridian Kess pressed herself deeper into the shadowed alcove between two cargo containers, her crystalline skin dulled by exhaustion and grief. The traditional mourning shroud of her people, once a shimmering cascade of silver thread, now hung in tatters around her shoulders. Pieces sold off day by day to keep her and her son alive. "Mama, I'm cold." 6-year-old Nix's voice was barely audible above the drumming rain. His small hands clutched at the remaining fabric of her shroud, seeking warmth that she could no longer provide. Viridian's throat constricted. The mourning period wasn't supposed to end like this, huddled in an alley trading sacred cloth for scraps of food. On Nethi's prime, widows were honored, cared for by their extended clans until the grief ceremonies concluded. But Nethi's prime was ash now, consumed in the war that had taken her husband Corvain, along with everything else she'd known. "I know, little star," she whispered, pulling him closer. Her stomach cramped with hunger, a constant companion these past weeks. Last credits from selling. Corvain's ceremonial blade had run out 3 days ago. The sound of approaching footsteps made her stiffen. A Bolian trader emerged from the rain, water streaming from his blue skin. His eyes swept over them dismissively, just another refugee family among thousands scattered across the outer colonies. "Please," Viridian forced herself to speak, hating how her voice cracked. "Do you need any work done? I can calculate shipping manifests, translate 7 languages, not hiring aliens." The trader grunted, not even slowing his pace. Viridian's jaw tightened. Before the war, she'd been a respected linguist, her talents sought after by diplomatic missions. Now, she was just another displaced person, her qualifications meaningless without proper documentation or references from a world that no longer existed. Nix tugged at what remained of her shroud. "Mama, you're shaking." She looked down at her, son Corvain's eyes staring back at her from a face that grew thinner each day. The ritual demanded she wear the mourning shroud for a full cycle, but rituals were luxuries for those who had homes and food. Her people would understand. They had to. With trembling fingers, she began to untie the final section of silver thread. The fabric was worth maybe 2 meals if she could find the right buyer. It was a betrayal of everything she'd been raised to believe, but keeping Nix alive mattered more than honoring the dead. "What are you doing?" Nix asked, his young voice heavy with understanding beyond his ears. "What I must," she replied, folding the precious cloth with reverent care. "Your father would want us to survive." As she stood to venture into the rain-soaked marketplace, Viridian tried not to think about what she would sell next when this piece was gone. There was nothing left but the simple undergarments she wore, and after that, only choices she refused to contemplate. The war had taken her husband, her world, and her dignity. But it wouldn't take her son. It's not while she still drew breath. Jackson Reed had learned long ago that caring about other people's problems was a luxury he couldn't afford. The salvage business on the Rim Worlds was brutal enough without getting emotionally invested in every sob story that crossed his path. But something about the alien woman haggling with Corin, the fabric merchant, made him pause in the doorway of the cantina. Rain dripping from his worn leather coat, she held herself with a dignity that seemed at odds with her desperate circumstances. Spine straight, voice steady, despite the tremor in her hands as she offered a piece of shimmering cloth. The child beside her watched everything with those 2 old eyes that Jackson recognized from his own mirror. Back when he'd been young and the galaxy had taken everything from him too. "Finest silver thread from Nethi's prime," the woman was saying. "Pre-war craftsmanship. Worth at least 50 credits. Corin barely glanced at the fabric. "Nethi's prime's gone, sweetheart. Makes this a curiosity at best. 10 credits, take it or leave it." Jackson saw her shoulders sag almost imperceptibly. 10 credits might buy them food for 2 days if they were careful. He'd watched this dance before desperation meeting opportunism in the gray markets of the outer colonies. 15, she countered, her voice hollow. 10's my final offer. Lots of refugees selling keepsakes these days. The woman's crystalline skin seemed to dim as she nodded. Jackson found himself moving before his brain could talk him out of it. "I'll give you 30 for it," he said, stepping up to the merchant's stall. Both the woman and Corin turned to stare at him. Up close, he could see the exhaustion etched into her features. The way she positioned herself protectively in front of the boy. 30, Corin sputtered. "Reed, what are you playing at?" "Same thing you are, just with better math." Jackson pulled the credits from his jacket and set them on the counter. "Nethy's craftsmanship doesn't come around often. I know a collector. Who'll pay triple that?" It was a lie, but a harmless one. The woman's eyes searched his face, looking for the catch. There always was one in places like this. "I don't accept charity," she said quietly. "Good thing this isn't charity, then. It's business." He gestured to the fabric. "You're selling, I'm buying. Clean transaction." The boy, her son, judging by the resemblance, tugged at her arm. "Mama, take it, please." After a long moment, she picked up the credits. "Thank you," she said, the words careful and formal. Jackson nodded and started to turn away. Job done. But something made him glance back. Maybe it was the way the kid was. Looking at his mother, or the slight tremor still visible in her hands. "There's a supply run leaving for the inner colonies tomorrow," he said. "Captain's looking for someone who can handle manifest translations. Pays decent." "Up. I can do that. I speak 7 languages. Yeah, heard." He pulled a data pad from his coat. "Docking Bay 12, freighter called Wandering Star. Tell Captain Martinez that Reed sent you." "Why are you helping us?" she asked. Jackson was quiet for a moment, watching the rain cascade off the station's grimy windows. "Because someone helped me once, when I needed it most. Figured it was time to pass that along." He walked away before she could respond, before he could change his mind or start asking himself questions he didn't want to answer. Behind him, he heard the boy's excited whisper, "Mama, we can get passage off this place." Jackson pulled his coat. Tighter against the rain. Sometimes doing the right thing was just another form of salvage. Work finding something valuable in the wreckage and giving it a chance to be useful again. Nix pressed his face against the small porthole in their shared quarters aboard the Wandering Star, watching the stars streak past as the ship jumped to hyperspace. For the first time in months, his stomach was full, and he had a real bed to sleep in, even if it was just a narrow bunk in the crew section. "Mama, look how fast they're moving," he whispered. Not wanting to wake the other passengers in the cramped compartment, Viridian sat on the edge of her own bunk, carefully mending a tear. In her remaining clothes, with thread she'd bought from the ship's stores, the work kept her hands busy, but Nix could tell her mind was elsewhere. It always was when she got that distant look in her crystalline eyes. "Do you think Papa can see the stars from where he is now?" Nix asked, his mother's hand stilled on. "The fabric. I think he can see everything, little star, including how brave you've been." Nix turned from the porthole to study her face. He was young, but not too young to understand that adults sometimes said things they didn't really believe, just to make children feel better. "Are you sad that you sold the mourning cloth?"
"I know,"
she said, and this time he could tell she meant it. The cloth was meant to honor your father's memory, but keeping you safe honors him more than any tradition ever could. A soft chime echoed through the ship's corridors, followed by Captain Martinez's voice over the intercom. "All crew and working passengers report to stations. We'll be dropping out of hyperspace in 20 minutes. Her simple tunic, she'd been working in the ship's translation center for 3 days now, converting cargo manifests and customs documents from a dozen different languages. It was tedious work, but she attacked it with a fierce concentration that impressed even the seasoned crew members. "I have to go help with the arrival procedures," she said, kneeling to his level. "Stay here and don't wander off." "Yes, I will. But Mama." Nix caught her hand before she could leave. "That man who helped us, Mr. Reed. Do you think we'll see him again?" "I don't know, Nix. Why?" The boy considered this carefully. He looked sad, like you do sometimes when you think I'm not watching. But different sad. Viridian's expression softened. "What do you mean, your sad is missing Papa? His sad is." Nix struggled for the words. "Like he lost something too, but he doesn't talk about it. You're very observant, little star. Will you try to find him when we reach the colony? Viridian was quiet for a long moment. Would you like that? I think maybe he's lonely too. And maybe lonely people should help each other, like Papa always said. After she left for her duties, Nyx returned to the porthole. The stars had stopped streaking now, returning to their familiar pinpricks of light against the black. Somewhere. Among them was their new destination, an agricultural colony called Haven's Rest, where Captain Martinez said there was always work for people willing to start over. Nyx thought about what starting over meant. For him, it was exciting a new place with new things to explore, but he could see it was harder for his mother. She carried their old life with her like a weight, all the memories of what they'd lost. Maybe that's why the sad man had helped them. Maybe he understood about carrying heavy things. The ship shuddered slightly as they dropped out of hyperspace, and through the porthole, Nyx could see a blue-green world growing larger against the stars. Haven's Rest, their new home. He pressed his palm against the cool. Transparacillin made a silent promise to his father's memory. He would help his mother find happiness again, even if it meant leaving some of their sadness behind among the stars. 3 weeks on Haven's Rest had taught Viridian that hope could be as dangerous as despair. The agricultural colony was everything Captain Martinez had promised: clean air, honest work, and people too busy with their own lives to judge refugees by their circumstances. She'd found employment in the colony's administrative center, her linguistic skills finally valued again. Yes. And Nyx had started attending the small school with other colonial children, but it was the message waiting at her terminal that morning that made her hand shake. Reed requesting meeting. Cantina on 5th Street, 1900 hours. Important. She'd wondered when she might see him again. Part of her had hoped it would be never, not because she was ungrateful, but because his kindness came with questions she wasn't ready to answer. Men like Jackson Reed didn't help strangers without reasons, and those reasons usually involved expectations. The cantina was quiet when she arrived, most of the colonists having retired early after long days in the fields. She found Reed at a corner table, nursing a glass of something amber-colored and staring out the window at the colony's main street. "You came," he said without looking at her. He said it was important. She remained standing, ready to leave. "If necessary, sit, please." When she reluctantly took the opposite chair, he finally met her eyes. "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." Viridian's chest tightened. "What?" "I didn't just happen to be on Kethera Station. I was tracking you." The words hit her like a physical blow. She started to rise, but his voice stopped her. "Your husband wasn't just a warrior, Viridian. He was Corvain Kesta, resistance leader who held the Nethes defense grid long enough for 20,000 civilians to evacuate. The Alliance has been looking for his family ever since. We're not Alliance assets," she said coldly. "No, you're not. That's why I didn't turn you over to them." Reed leaned forward. "Corvain saved my sister's ship during the evacuation. She was a transport pilot, got out with 300 refugees because your husband bought them time. She didn't survive the war, but those people did. Their children did." Viridian felt the familiar weight of survivors' guilt settle on her shoulders. "So this was all about payment of a debt at first." His admission was quiet, "But then I watched you with your son, saw how you'd rather starve than compromise your dignity. That's not something you can fake. What do you want from us?" Reed was silent for a long moment. "The truth. I want to stop running. Been drifting from world to world since the war ended, telling myself I was honoring my sister's memory by helping refugees. But really, I was just avoiding having to figure out what comes next. And you think we're the answer to that? I think maybe we could help each other figure it out." He gestured toward the window where the colony's lights twinkled in the gathering dusk. "This is a good place. Safe. Your boy could grow up normal here. What about the Alliance? They've got bigger problems than one widow and her child. Long as you stay quiet about Corvain's final transmission, they'll leave you alone." Viridian's blood chilled. "What transmission?" Reed's expression grew grim. "The one where he told you where he hid the Nethes defense protocols. The codes that could unlock every Alliance military installation in this sector." The cantina seemed to spin around her. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. That's why you've been running, why you won't settle down anywhere permanent. Because somewhere in that brilliant mind of yours, you remember exactly what he told you before he died. Outside, Nix's laughter echoed from the school playground where he was playing with his new friends, sound of a child who is finally, tentatively beginning to heal. Viridian closed her eyes. If I tell you, what happens to my son? He gets to stay a child, Reed said simply, instead of growing up to be a weapon. 6 months later, Viridian stood in the doorway of the small house that had somehow become home. Watching Nix chase fireflies in the garden they'd planted together, his laughter rang clear in the warm evening air, no longer carrying the weight of premature understanding that had marked him during their desperate months as refugees. He's getting tall, Jackson said, joining her on the porch. He carried 2 cups of tea, steam rising in the cooling air. I'll have to take his pants out again. She accepted the tea gratefully. He asked me today if you were going to stay. Jackson had been living in the colony's temporary housing for months, ostensibly while he established his new salvage operation, but his visits to their home had become daily occurrences, first under the pretense of checking on their security, then simply because none of them seemed to know how to maintain distance anymore. What did you tell him? That it's complicated? She glanced at him sideways. Is it? The question hung between them, weighted with months of careful friendship and unspoken possibilities. After Viridian had finally shared Corvain's final message, the location of data caches that could destabilize the fragile post-war peace, Jackson had helped her destroy every trace of the information. Some secrets were too dangerous to trust to governments or causes. Some knowledge was meant to die with its keepers. I've been thinking about buying the old Hendricks farm, Jackson said quietly. It's got good soil, room for expansion, could use a linguist to help with the off-world trade contracts. And could this linguist bring her son? So I was hoping she would. Place needs some life in it. Nix came running up to the porch, his small hands cupping something carefully. Mama, look, I caught 3 fireflies, but I'm going to let them go, because Jackson says they're happier free. Jackson is very wise, Viridian said, ruffling her son's hair. Are you going to marry him? Nix asked, with the startling directness of children. Both adults froze. Viridian felt heat rise in her cheeks, but Jackson's response surprised her. Would you be okay with that? He asked Nix seriously. The boy considered this with the same gravity he might apply to any important decision. Will you teach me to fix starships if you want to learn? And will you help take care of Mama when she gets sad about Papa? Jackson's voice was gentle. Yes, but you know your Papa will always be special to both of us, right? No one could ever replace him. I know. But maybe we could just add you to our family instead of replacing anybody. Viridian felt tears prick her eyes. From the mouths of children came the wisdom that adults spent years struggling to understand. What do you think? Jackson asked her, his voice carefully neutral despite the hope she could see in his eyes. She looked out at the garden, at the life they'd built from the ashes of loss. Corvain would have liked this place, she realized. He would have wanted her to find happiness again, to give Nix the stable childhood the war had stolen from him. I think, she said slowly, that some foundations are strong enough to build on twice. Nix whooped with joy and released his fireflies, which spiraled up into the star-filled sky like tiny wishes taking flight. Later, when he'd been tucked into bed with promises of starship lessons and farm adventures, Viridian and Jackson sat on the porch swing, planning a future neither had dared to imagine during their darkest days. Above them, the stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human grief and joy alike. But here, in this small corner of the galaxy, 3 broken people had found a way to become whole, again not by forgetting their losses, but by learning that love wasn't a finite resource, it could be shared, renewed, and built upon one careful choice at a time. The war had taken much from all of them, but it hadn't taken everything. And sometimes, that was enough to begin again.